The rain hammered against the windows, mimicking the frantic beat of my heart. My stomach growled, the only sound louder than the storm's fury. Another delivery, another dollar, another step closer to paying off the rent. Glancing at the address on the slip, I felt a shiver course down my spine. 13 Elm Street, notorious for its eerie silence and the rumor of a resident who never left their house. Superstitions aside, I needed the money. I grabbed my insulated bag, piled high with steaming pizzas, and ventured out into the downpour. The street, usually lively, was eerily deserted. The only light came from the flickering street lamp at the corner, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the wind. I swore I saw a figure dart back into the darkness, but the storm's fury made it impossible to be sure. The house at 13 Elm Street loomed before me, its windows like dark, vacant eyes staring out into the storm. The air hung thick and heavy, laced with the scent of damp earth and something else, something insidious, that sent prickles down my neck. I climbed the creaking porch steps, the wood groaning under my weight. As I pressed the doorbell, a low, guttural growl escaped my throat. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a sound born of ancient shadows. The bell echoed, a metallic shriek that froze the storm's fury for a moment. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. A pair of glowing red eyes, like embers burning in the night, flickered in the gloom. I stammered out the details of the order, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. The figure, its voice a raspy whisper like dry leaves rustling, confirmed the order and reached out with a gnarled hand, its fingers long and bony. My hand instinctively retreated. There was something wrong, something deeply unsettling about the hand, as if it were made of something more than flesh and bone. The figure, seemingly oblivious to my hesitation, grabbed the pizza box and slammed the door with a sickening thud. I stumbled back, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. Back in my car, I felt a chill that wasn't from the rain. I looked at the receipt, noting the name scrawled in an unsteady hand. Mr. Blackwood. The red ink seemed to bleed through the paper, leaving a faint crimson stain. I felt a surge of unease, almost as if the ink itself was alive. As I drove away, the rain intensified, blurring the world outside. A sense of dread consumed me, growing heavier with each passing mile. I couldn't shake the image of those red eyes, burning into my memory. The next morning, I woke to the radio news reporting a strange incident in my neighborhood. A fire, a horrific blaze that had engulfed 13 Elm Street. The newscaster mentioned a possible arson investigation, but there was no mention of the homeowner. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Blackwood, the man with the glowing red eyes, had vanished into the flames, leaving only the taste of fear on my tongue. The neon glow of the pizza shop sign cast a sickly yellow light on the wet asphalt, reflecting the rain that fell in sheets. It was late, past midnight, and the only other soul in sight was a lone figure slumped against the building, its face obscured by a hooded jacket. My gut told me to turn around, but the promise of a generous tip on the delivery slip kept me moving. The address, a dilapidated apartment building on the edge of town, sent a tremor of apprehension down my spine. As I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the air felt dense with a cloying scent of mildew and something else, something acrid and unsettling. The only sounds were the rhythmic dripping of water and the echo of my own footsteps. Reaching the designated door, I hesitated. Through the grime-coated glass panel, I saw the silhouette of a figure sitting hunched over a table. It was hard to make out any features in the dimness, but the air around the figure crackled with an unsettling energy. I knocked hesitantly, and the figure, his back to me, slowly turned. He was an older man, his face contorted by a mask of pain and desperation. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, his lips crusted with what seemed to be dried blood. He stared at me with a silent, unnerving intensity. "Your pizza," I said, trying to sound casual, my voice cracking under the weight of his gaze. He didn't speak, merely pointed a gaunt finger to the table. I placed the pizza box down, my hand shaking. The figure slowly reached out, his fingers trembling with an eagerness that sent chills down my spine. He ripped open the box, his movements jerky and almost desperate. He grabbed a slice, taking a large bite before I could process what was happening. His eyes widened, his expression morphing from hunger to a terrifying rage. He tore into the pizza, devouring it in an almost feral frenzy. A guttural shriek ripped through the silence as the man clutched his throat, his face contorted in agony. He fell back, his eyes bulging, filled with an unfathomable terror. Then, silence. Complete silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stared at the man, frozen in place, fear clamping down on my heart like a vice. Hesitantly, I approached the figure. As I drew closer, I noticed a faint metallic glint on the floor. It was a single, rusted razor blade. It lay nestled among the pizza box, its edge gleaming ominously. I shuddered, a realization dawning upon me. The man had not simply devoured the pizza, he had consumed something far more sinister, something lurking beneath the surface, something that had driven him to his gruesome end. I fled the apartment, The image of the man's tortured face seared into my memory. As I stepped out into the rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just witnessed something deeply unsettling, something that defied logic and reason. The last slice of the pizza lay untouched, a chilling reminder of the man's final, horrific meal. The clock on the dashboard ticked past 6:00 p.m., the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows across the deserted street. Tonight, the orders were stacked high, and the last one on the list was a special request for a small, forgotten town nestled in the foothills. The address was handwritten, barely legible, and the name, Mrs. Abernathy, evoked an unsettling sense of familiarity, though I couldn't place it. As I navigated the winding mountain roads, the sky turned a bruised purple, threatening to unleash a storm. The air grew colder, carrying the bitter scent of pine and something else, something faintly metallic. The town, a collection of ramshackle houses clinging to the hillside, was eerily silent. The only sound came from the howling wind that whipped through the bare trees, creating a symphony of eerie whispers and groans. Mrs. Abernathy's house stood at the end of a dirt road, a crumbling wooden structure that looked as if it had been abandoned for years. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was peeling off in thick, flaky sheets. The only signs of life were the faint flickers of light from within. Trepidation gnawed at my insides as I walked up the creaky porch steps, each groan of the wood echoing in the stillness. I knocked hesitantly on the door, the sound barely audible over the wind's howling. The door swung open slowly, revealing a woman, her face obscured by the shadows inside. She was tall and gaunt, her skin pale and papery, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural intensity. Her clothing was old-fashioned, a faded dress that seemed to have been ripped from a bygone era. "Is this for me?" she asked in a voice that sounded like dry leaves rustling. It was a voice devoid of warmth, a voice that spoke of secrets kept and forgotten. I nodded, handing her the pizza box. Her fingers were cold and skeletal, as if they were made of bone and not flesh. She took the box, her eyes never leaving mine. "Thank you," she said, her voice hollow, almost echoing. Before I could turn away, I caught a glimpse of the interior. It was dark and cramped, cluttered with dusty furniture and cobweb-draped ornaments. A sense of dread washed over me, an icy chill that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. I hurried back to my car, the woman's unsettling gaze tracing my movements. The moment I was safely inside, I slammed the door shut, as if it would seal out the darkness that seemed to cling to her, to the house, to the entire town. As I drove away, I glanced back at the house, its dark windows like vacant eyes staring out into the gathering storm. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something deeply unsettling, something that lay buried beneath the surface of this town, this house, this woman. But what? I could only offer a silent prayer, hoping that I had successfully delivered the last pizza of my life. Like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.